Hello and welcome to this video on analysing the impact the physical factor can have during the performance development process or during a PDP. Today we're going to look at analysing the impact the physical factor can have in a PDP and specifically looking at what impact it can have during a training session. Things you'll be able to do today are to name physical subfactors. You also need to be able to name different approaches for each factor, and we're then going to think about examples of how the physical factor may impact an approach. Here are the subfactors that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to focus specifically on the physical factor. We also need to have an understanding of the performance development process, and during your PDP, regardless of the factor, you're going to be trying to work on various different subfactors using some of the approaches or types of training shown. Today we're going to focus specifically on the impact that the physical factor can have on these different approaches. There's three main types of analyse questions that might involve factors which impact on performance, and you could be asked in your higher exam to analyse the impact that the mental, emotional, social or physical factors can have on performance in a game or individual activity. You might be asked to analyse how the mental, emotional, social, physical factors impact on each other. Or you might be asked to look at the impact they have on the performance development process, which is basically a training session from your PDP. Here's what an example question may look like. Now, to answer this question, you're going to have to use the three-step process because it's an analyse question. We're going to try and break it down into a specific example from a training session. We're then going to give the impact that this has upon you, and then what does it lead to in terms of trying to improve performance. So, as we've said, we're going to pick out a specific example. We're then going to give the implication, so this means that. And then what does this lead to? Well, this leads to having a positive or negative impact on performance. Here are some physical subfactors that could have a positive or negative impact during a training session. CRE, power, muscular endurance, consistency of skill, accuracy and technique. Here are some examples that I've come up with. Try and come up with your own examples of how these things might positively or negatively impact on a PDP. Consistency of skill is important when performing shadow practice to improve your overhead clear. Accuracy of serve is important when developing your overhead clear through a repetition practice. Technique is important during continuous training in swimming to develop CRE. CRE is important during a repetition drill. And muscular endurance is important in swimming when performing interval training. Now, these are just the specific examples. To access a mark here, you would then have to give the implication. So this means that. And then what does this lead to? And we're going to look at two examples of 1 mark of analysis. So again, we're going to pick out a specific example of how this factor could impact during a training session. We're then going to show, how could this actually impact during the session and what does it lead to? What's the possible outcome this could have on your development? Here is an example of 1 mark. So CRE is important during a repetition drill in badminton. This means that if I'm doing a repetition drill to improve my overhead clear, as I get towards the end of this drill, I'm breathing heavily and my arm is beginning to get tired because I'm repeating one motion over and over. This leads to me not being able to generate enough power and to work on my technique due to me being tired. Here's a different example. Accuracy of serve is important when developing your overhead clear through repetition practice. This means if I get an accurate serve to the back of the court, I can focus on my technique rather than me having to move to the side if the feed is accurate. This leads to me being able to continuously practice my overhead clear technique from the correct area of the court. Hope you found this video useful on looking at the impact the physical factor can have on performance during a training session.